I'm an advanced development engineer for Hydro, which is the world's largest vertically integrated aluminum supplier. So I'm an engineer. I'm not an IT person. So I guess first of all, thanks for inviting us out here. And I guess why I'm here is to share a little bit about what we've done in development for Underride systems and why we need to develop that. So I'll start out by saying we're an aluminum supplier. Our customers are the trailer companies who use these guards, and my specific role is to look at applications which we could benefit them, and generally that's always been a lightweighting option. So I'll kind of give you a little brief background on where we came at this one. So in 2010, 2011, we kind of took a look at the trailers, always looking for opportunities for us to sell more aluminum. And what that comes down to is generally we're displacing steel. Okay, and one of the last parts of the trailer for us to recognize was steel, was the Underride, and so this idea is, well, could we make a lighter Underride? Because at the time, and I still today, lightweighting is very important for anything that requires energy to move. And that's money. So that was the original goal. Can we reduce the weight on these? And our goal is we don't design parts for the OEs. We're just simply hoping to inspire them or help them and say we can offer these design assistances, because aluminum as a material is not generally well recognized by a lot of engineers. Traditionally it's steel, and so there's some different design aspects to aluminum, and that's where a lot of my job is to help folks who primarily design in steel see some of the advantages of aluminum and how to design with them. So this was just a concept. The concept was a model, and it was to say, hey, look, we through finite element analysis, we can match the strength of a steel guard, and we have an aluminum guard that's lighter. It's an idea, and that was a ways back. As I kind of moved forward on some projects and some things, I, like everyone who's here, Lois and Marianne, they never knew what Underride was for, really why it was there. I can tell you everyone in my family knows about it now just because I work on it, and I didn't really realize the safety aspect of it. As time went on, we understood, you know what, originally our goals were to lightweight this product, but you know what, with the lightweighting, we could probably make it safer and also still save weight, and it was another design challenge for us. So that's kind of what led us to where we are today, and to some of the results we have, and you can see kind of our priorities changed a little bit, and we put safety on top, and all of this is transpiring during these years where a lot of stuff is happening. So and lastly, that kind of led us to we need to understand, as we are trying to help others engineer and design with aluminum, we need to understand it as well. So we do a lot of lab tests of our own on the material, and for this is a totally uncharted territory for us in the semi world. But during these years of development from 2011, and so we've spent a lot of time with the automotive industry as an aluminum supplier, and in that industry, a lot of the focus on safety and lightweighting have kind of culminated to using aluminum for a lot of applications, including crash management systems in cars and vehicles. So we develop a lot of crash boxes, different devices that absorb energy, and it's just an effect of the material itself. So we thought, well, we could integrate some of this in there as well. And that led us to where we are today. I brought just to share a couple videos of our testing and what we're able to accomplish. This particular car here is 35 miles an hour, 30% offset, and we chose to run these tests because we passed a regular 100%, and we thought, well, we need to really test this and see where it goes. So that drove us to running these tests here. We just followed with the IIHS. We had their guidelines and things, and obviously the trailer OEs are our partners, they're our customers, and we're there to support them. And so we wanted to kind of they're asked to or they're seeing the same things we are from the IIHS or from different things, and we just wanted to be on par with what's happening. This is another angle of that same crash. And I think that the important part here is in this particular design, we actually, it's a little over-designed. fact that some of the cavities we designed to absorb energy could be further optimized. So really just saying, this is just a concept to show that with aluminum, you can create a safe underride for a weight that doesn't cost, in some applications, a weight savings, but in most applications, there's no weight penalty. Okay. Before and after shot of it, you can see there is some deformation there. We're pretty excited. But the second part of that was we thought, well, can we, this is great. We had one other concept that we'd come up with, and so we went ahead and we tested that as well. With our FEA models, we knew ahead of time that it would probably be stronger, and so we had a limited amount of resources and cars there, so we decided we would run a little bit more speed, which we hadn't seen done before. This just illustrates no passenger compartment intrusion, which we kind of came to understand is probably the most important thing of this test here is when you're all said and done, you can open the door and get out. We work enough with our automotive guys to understand, like, the cars that we're working on with them, their systems are incredible for absorbing energy, and so we thought, well, our goal is just let this car use what's been designed into it and to absorb the energy. So moving forward, this is a shot of the same test rerun, but at 40 miles an hour, and I had to explain this. I'll put it like this: I had to explain this to my folks who are not engineers, and say, what's the difference of 5 miles an hour? But it's energy. So it's the simple equation is 1/2 mv mass times velocity squared. And so as the velocity goes up, your energy goes up, and it's not a linear relationship. So 5 miles an hour is actually a significant increase in energy. And this is our result here. Was just, this guard was able to take it, and we're actually able to utilize some of our crash alloy properties of the bumper itself. I'll show you some pictures of that. But obviously, this bumper started to break away. The bumper itself remained together. What we had was our attachment points failed. I think it's really important to point out too in all this is that we're the first ones to recognize that these are an Underride, like we're working with our automotive customers. An Underride bumper is part of a system. It's not something that you own a Toyota Corolla, you can't go buy a safer bumper that just bolts on. It's a fully integrated system. And so for us, it was kind of we can only get so close. We don't build the trailers. We're just there to promote an idea and a concept. And in this case, we took it to the limit, and even though we gusseted these frames some more, we broke the rear sill of the trailer. You can see it here giving way, but the bumpers held together and absorbed energy. So there's a lot to it. This is not just a simple, you can't just make something stronger and bolt it on. It's an entire system. And for us in testing, this was just a method for us to kind of, finalize, hey, we validated some of our models in helping with our engineering. I'll walk you through just a couple more here. This is a before and after. You can see this one obviously took more damage. And this is just an example. Aluminum in general, especially the majority of the common 6000 series alloys, which is what we sell almost every day, your standard 6061 T6. When they go past a yield condition, they will generally crack or fracture. Once the material is cracked or fractured, it loses the ability to absorb energy. And so with a crash alloy, the difference here is you can see this mushrooming effect where the bumpers don't break, but they plastically deform and move around, and in doing so, you're displacing energy. So this was the result of 40 miles an hour. You could open the doors and close the doors of this car and walk away as well. And I can just give you a little, just leave you with this. This was a 40 mile an hour, and we got to run these tests. We don't do this normally, and this was kind of something that was a survivable crash. So there's the end there.
Malcolm, I just want to make sure that everybody realizes that when Underride is prevented, the car is still very damaged, but it's that there's not, it doesn't go past, can you
Yes,
talk about that?
yeah, and we really have some experts here who deal with this, but the simple layman's understanding is passenger compartment intrusion, just simply meaning that the greenhouse or this area where you sit in the car, it is not intruded by any part of the trailer or anything else. And cars are designed to look like this after a wreck. The reason being is that's just energy being absorbed. There's a large amount of energy, and it's a very violent to witness these in person is quite the experience. But it's very violent. There's a lot of energy being released, and it has to go somewhere. And it takes a lot of energy to bend materials. And so in our case, with the bending of the aluminum, it absorbs energy, and that's part of a property of that specific alloy. So is that good? And any other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you.
I don't have slides. Hi, my name is Jason Levine. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Auto Safety. And I want to start with some thank yous, particularly to Marianne and Lois for putting this together. And I saw John from the Truck Safety Coalition back there. This is an issue that's been around, depending on how you frame it, although the patent now at least goes back to 1913. The NHTSA's had regs on the books even before it was NHTSA in the 50s. And I certainly know there have been folks working on this since the 80s. I want to thank Senator Gillibrand and her staff for putting this together, and all the other members, staff who have joined us today. I know I saw Peter Kurdock back there somewhere from Advocates. I know they've been working on this too. So I think what this speaks to is sort of how wide-ranging, and some other folks have been working on this for a lot longer than I have personally, where the center really has been involved in this. I've been working on this for a long time because this is an issue that, for some reason, continues to not see a tremendous amount of progress on a day-to-day basis despite the advancement of technology. And so a little bit about what the Center for Auto Safety is, I think, will help explain why we've become interested in trying to spread the word about this. We were founded in 1970 by Ralph Nader and Consumers Union. We've been an independent voice for consumer safety, auto safety, quality, and fuel economy since then. And we push for lemon laws in every state, airbags in every vehicle, free recall repairs. And one of the things we've consistently done is where we see safety technology available, push for it as a standard as opposed to a luxury. So think about current topics that you might be familiar with. Automatic emergency braking is something that is currently available in some luxury models. There's been a voluntary agreement that will be available on all new cars starting in 2022. We'd like to see that as mandatory today, not in 2022. Or rear seat belts. We have them in cars. We don't have warnings on them. There's a law actually on the books that says they have to be required in all new cars. Another safety device, that's actually a warning. It's not even a new device. It's a device that already exists that we like to see. So, which brings us to Underride. There's a lot of interesting technical issues, as Malcolm was just talking about, and I know others will discuss. When we talk about safety in trucking, but with Underride, there's not really a lot of question as to are there solutions available to the problem. The main thrust of objections to the solutions proposed have been around cost and benefits, which is what Marianne and Lois asked me to talk about today. And I'll note that there's also an interesting solution or situation from a regulatory perspective because there is a retrofit solution. Often when we're talking about safety devices, you're generally just talking prospectively. What can we put on new vehicles, new products? In this instance, there actually is a retrofit available, which makes it a slightly unusual circumstance. So let's talk about cost benefits. So generally, when we talk about cost benefits in a regulatory construct and a safety perspective, the purpose, right, is to make sure that the cost to provide whatever the benefit is, and in this case, it's not dying or being critically injured underneath a truck, doesn't outweigh the cost of so doing, and this instance would be putting trucks out of business, for example, which would certainly cripple the economy, right? So that's sort of the balance that is intended to be struck. So, as you may have seen this week, new traffic crash fatality data came out for 2016. Numbers are again on the rise. We're at over 37,000 traffic-related deaths last year. That's a rise of 5.6% from the previous year, which is also an increase of 2.6% per vehicle mile traveled, up from 1.15 in 2015 to 1.18 in 2016. The last time NHTSA looked at the societal cost of traffic deaths, injuries, and property damage, it was in 2010, and that was $836 billion. That's in 2010, and in 2016 there were 10% more deaths than in 2010. So we're probably approaching $1 trillion, somewhere in that range. We talk about large trucks. In 2016, there were 4,317 deaths involving large trucks. Again, that's an increase from the previous year. 72% of those were non-truck vehicles. Generally speaking, that's pickup trucks or light vehicle or cars. We don't have the new estimated injury numbers yet, but in 2015 it was 116,000. I figure it's around the same number, if not more. So what about Underride specifically? Well, this is where it gets a little bit trickier. The data and the details on how to collect that data are under some dispute. As you'll hear about when people talk about Underride, sometimes they're talking about rear Underride, side Underride, front Underride, or all three at the same time. When you look at data associated with Underride, it's important to sort of know which category is being discussed. Sometimes it's all of them, sometimes it's just one or the other. But some estimates have put 20% of those killed when a passenger vehicle strikes a large truck. It's happening because they're colliding with the side of a truck. Others, as the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute did a study, that over a 2-year period, 75% of rear-end crashes where the striking vehicle was a light vehicle got to about 250 fatalities a year. NHTSA's National Center for Statistics and Analysis noted 218 Underride fatalities in 2014, but didn't specify location, side, rear, or front. And that also raises how accurate are these numbers. There's a lot of studies out there that suggest Underride fatalities are severely undercounted. I found one that said they were undercounted by a factor of 6, others a factor of 3.7. Someone went and reviewed 29 different states' police accident reports, found an undercount of about 3.1. And that same study figured about 200 annual deaths from side impact crashes. So I think so when we talk about the death statistics, they are in the hundreds, and there's some dispute around exactly how many hundreds. Two important things to remember there. One, we're not talking about catastrophic injuries, paraplegic, quadriplegic, or even when people do walk away, sometimes it's after 5, 10, 20 surgeries. And then also, as so aptly described much better than I ever will, by Marianne and Lois, these are not just numbers, whether it's one or hundreds, these are real people. And they're personal stories, and that's why we're here. We're here because of people, and how do we address what we can with safety technology that exists in a way that doesn't break the bank, so to speak. So, which gets us to rulemaking, and sort of how, when we enter a regulatory process, and while there's legislation that is being discussed, I think it's helpful to look at the record that exists. And so NHTSA in 2015 put out a rule on rear side guards, and found, based on its study, that only 1.1 lives would be saved by the rear underguards that they were looking at the time based on the data collected. Now, how did they get to 1.1 out of somewhere between 200 and 600 potential deaths out there, depending on how you count them? Well, they reasoned out of the hundreds of deaths every year, not all of them would be prevented. A car was going too fast, so yeah, everyone needs to slow down. No disagreements there. Occupants weren't wearing their seatbelts. Everyone needs to wear their seatbelts, front and back. The occupants were too old. I haven't figured out how to fix that one. And then the cost. When they looked at, and I'll get to the retrofit in a second. So I think it's important when we have these conversations to make sure that there is a recognition that when we talk about safety, there is costs that are being added. But it's sort of at what is the balance? What is the net gain to society? What is the net gain overall throughout the system that we're talking about? And I'm also a firm believer, as Malcolm was talking about, American ingenuity comes up with solutions all the time to problems when pushed to do so, and makes things cheaper and better on a constant and regular basis, particularly when whole industries are engaged in it and when there's a regulatory structure or incentive to do so. So as I said, somewhere between 200 and 600 rear, side, and front fatalities every year. Maybe that number might be a little bit low, maybe it's a little high. NHTSA, despite saying only 1.1 person would be saved in their rear underguard rule, NPR, said that it would still be a net benefit of just under $1 million. So again, if one life were saved, it was going to be a net benefit of just under $1 million. Now they did say if the retrofit went in, it would be a cost of approximately $400 million over the life of all of the trucks on the road today. Again, that's still only just saving that one life. But what if the numbers are just a little bit wrong? What if we save 10 lives a year? Not hundreds, not all of them, just 10. Well, regulatory, the value of statistical life is just over $9 million a year. So by year 5, you'd be saving $450 million. You've now covered the retrofit costs. And remember, that's not counting a single injury prevented or mitigated. So forget about the rules for a second. What about product liability? Lawsuits in this space can go anywhere from $1 million. There was one for $36 million. That's a real risk that businesses are carrying with them. And then there's the moral liability. You know, if you're driving a rig, that's something that's not going to walk with you. That's not something that's just going to go away. And especially when there's life-saving technology that exists, it seems like the tie, even if it's exactly even, should go to life. And it seems to me that the balance tips in favor of the benefit. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Robert Lane. I'm the Vice President of Product Engineering for Wabash National Corporation. Wabash is the largest tank or trailer manufacturer in North America. We manufacture all kinds of trailers. I've been in the industry for 18 years. And it is an industry that is very concerned about safety. And we know, so I can talk louder. We know that while uncommon, underride collisions occur, and they're sometimes fatal, and that's tragic. Without a doubt, the best way to prevent underride is through collision avoidance technology. And we're encouraged that the technology in passenger cars is getting better, but that's a ways off before we're going to see it. The heavy-duty trucking industry, Wabash included, we have projects underway right now to develop and improve vehicle-to-vehicle communications, and that'll improve the safety of our roadways. However, Wabash is we're investigating the potential to create a side underride device that is commercially viable. We're attempting to develop the device that will provide underride prevention, and that is the side underride prevention, as prescribed by the IIHS, which Matt will tell you about in a minute, underride test and function is required in most operational situations, and that is important. We debuted this device at the North American Commercial Vehicle Show, and that was in Atlanta 2 weeks ago, where it's a prototype, and we've got a ways to go, but we are fully committed to commercializing this device and making a commercially viable device. Wabash National has always been a safety leader in the industry and will continue to be committed to work with our customers and our shareholders to make our highways safer. I don't have a presentation. I'm here for questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Brumbelow, and I'm a research engineer at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. And as everyone else has said, I just want to thank Marion and Lois for inviting me, and for all of you for turning out just to hear about this issue. What I'm going to talk about today is specifically our research on rear and side truck underride. And as Jason mentioned, the 2016 fatality data was just released by NHTSA 2 weeks ago, and so I've included that in these updated charts. But what we're looking at here is not specifically underride crashes, because has already been mentioned, Underride and whether it occurs in a specific crash is not tabulated well across the state. Some states don't record it at all. Others record it, but the investigating officer might not be trained on what Underride is or looks like. So studies that we have done have suggested that it is vastly undercounted, maybe by a factor of 3 or 4. So instead of just limiting to Underride crashes, what these data are showing is all crashes involving one passenger vehicle, so car, SUV, minivan, pickup, and a large truck. And I've broken large trucks down into single unit trucks. So these would be like a delivery truck or another box type truck, and tractor trailers. And this is important because from a regulatory perspective, single unit trucks do not have to have Underride guards at all right now. Whereas trailers, semi-trailers, are required to have rear Underride guards. So these data show rear and side impacts with regard to the truck or the trailer. And you can see that the rear impact fatalities have been increasing since 2010 up to 2016. There was a decline from 2015 to 2016, which is a promising sign. However, 2016 is still higher than any other year on this chart. So up to about 240, 230 fatalities in 2016 for tractor trailer rear impacts. And then side impacts have been consistently around 300 for the past several years with tractor trailers, and then another 75 or so with single unit trucks. Typically, our research has tried to go beyond those fatality data and get into specific crash reports and studies, investigations where we can get more data than what's recorded on the accident report. And specifically in 2010, we did a study of about 200 rear impact cases where there was photographic data and other measurements that were taken at the scene. And this is important to, as you can see, no one looking at that picture on the top would say that there was no Underride, but there's probably about a 20% chance that that was actually coded on the form, that it was an Underride crash. Of those 200, we're talking about all large trucks. When you boil it down to what's really relevant to the fatalities, at the time there were 16 cases that had a semi-trailer with a guard that meets the current NHTSA rule, which went into effect in 1998. Of those 16, 14 involved severe Underride. So that's this 88% number. Yes, 16 is a small number to extrapolate from, but it's kind of the best that we have with the current data. And then single unit trucks, there were fewer, lower percentage, but still quite significant, 65%. And again, those trucks are not required to have any Underride guards at the moment. Some of them do, and these are not subject to strength requirements if they do have the guards, so we can't say how well it would perform. And based on that real-world study, we in 2011 decided, we can't, there's a big thing that's missing. We can't look at the picture on the top there and know what the impact speed was. If someone survives that crash, they're unlikely to remember much about it. And so what we did, we tried to reconstruct some of the most common scenarios, but just to see at what speed are these guards actually doing what they're made to do. And we chose 35 miles an hour because this is, for passenger cars, they are mandated that they wall at 35 miles an hour. So to hit a trailer at 35 miles an hour, unfortunately, can be a very different outcome. So this is a 2007 model. We bought it, it had not been used before. It was the same design that this company was using, I believe, up until 2012 or so. And then there were, in this initial batch, 3 manufacturers that we looked at. Based on those 2 things, so the crash test data that we now had with the real-world cases, we petitioned NHTSA to upgrade the regulation in 2011. We did not hear promising things from NHTSA after that petition, And based on those initial tests, we were getting really good feedback from the trailer manufacturers that, many times they coming to see the crash tests, which they're all invited to come, see those, they had no clue how the device was going to perform in a more real world condition like a crash test. And so they were able to use those results to go back and improve their design. This would be a good time to say the regulation is not a crash test. It's pushing an 8-inch square plate against the bumper at a very slow speed to see how much force it can withstand. So again, they were glad to get these results, and as we saw from that, we thought, it makes sense not to wait around for rulemaking, but to just start testing. And so we took the 8 largest trailer manufacturers in North America, and of those 8, we ran all of them in 3 different conditions, all 35 miles an hour. But the first test centered with the guard, so 100% overlap, and then offset so that 50% of the car is loading the guard, and then 30%. Malcolm showed you the 30%. That's the most extreme case. All but 1 passed that center impact, and I think all but 2 passed the 50%. But then once we moved out to the 30, there was only 1 of the 8 that could pass it. Since then, there's been huge progress. So in the 5 years since we started testing, 6 of the 8 now pass even that most extreme test condition, and the last 2 are scheduled to test later this year, so we're hopeful that they will also do well. But I wanted to show you, this is actually from Robert's company, the Wabash improvements that they made. These are voluntary, nobody's forcing them to do this, but seeing how the vehicle did on the top in the initial design, and then how it did in the bottom on the redesign, these are 30% overlap tests at 35 miles an hour. Clearly, very drastic difference. Left is the old design and right is the new design. And I think this is great. Robert has told me that today, he told me this, that they've looked at other offsets and other angles, so they're not just designing to the test. They're trying to go above and beyond and look at the real world problem. But it took a crash test with these comparative data to start getting the ball rolling and getting people looking at improvements. So that's rear. Side underride is a shorter story because there is no regulation at all. But we did a similar study with the cases that have been done where there is documented pictures and measurements. A very similar percentage, 86% of semi-trailers could have benefited from a side guard. The difference here being, since there is no guard, we can't say, how much stronger would the guard have to be, because you're starting from scratch. Some of these are going to be very high-speed crashes, but as you saw, 35 miles an hour looks like, and you wouldn't think it would look that severe. That was pretty much all that happened from our perspective until 2017, when we have now run 2 crash tests with this device called an Angel Wing airflow deflector. They're based in Canada, but they sell products in the US and in Canada. As the first to bring a completely aftermarket solution, but to the market, and it's for sale now. You can buy one to put on your trailer if you want to. And so we ran, again, comparative crash tests. The first one, this is not a side underride guard. This is an aerodynamic fairing. You'll see these on a lot of trailers today. They're designed to save gas, and they do that well, but they do not prevent underride. They're not designed to do that. So this is the test without a guard, and you can see what Malcolm was talking about before. You're bypassing all the front structure of the car, which has been designed, as I said, to hit a rigid wall and protect the occupants inside. But with the Angel Wing, the structure is there. This is the test with the Angel Wing. There's still the aerodynamic fairing on the side, but the structure's there. The car can do what it's designed to do and absorb the crash energy. These tests were at 35 miles an hour. We ran a another test of the Angel Wing at 40 miles an hour, and it still survived. It is still allowed a survivable crash for the dummy inside. That is about 30% more energy going up from 35 to 40. My last slide is just a comment on where NHTSA has put themselves with the rulemaking and some of the Institute response to that. So in 2015, they proposed to adopt the Canadian regulation. This is what Jason was referring to earlier. Part of the big issue of why I wouldn't save that many more lives is that 93% at the time, it's probably even higher now, the fleet's already compliant. So they're already either selling trailers in Canada, so they're meeting this requirement, or they've just voluntarily done this. But our response has been to that does not guarantee offset protection. So going above and beyond what Canada has done is the guard wouldn't protect anyone at 36 miles an hour. It'd only protect them up to 35. So these are the kinds of things where I don't think you should have to do a cost benefit in this way, but if you're going to do it, you at least need to get the data correct. And so we don't think that that has happened. Side underride is harder to comment on because they've made one statement that I'm aware of in 1991, just saying it wouldn't be cost effective, but they never published any data to support that. So I can't even tell you what that's based on because it hasn't been released. This is, if you wanted to look up some of the specific things in our petition or the response to the NHTSA rulemaking, you can go to IIHS.org, and then you would go to the large trucks topic page, and there's lots of information there for you. Also, if I didn't get my cards, anyone would like to email me, the address is here at the bottom. Thanks.
So we're in Austin, Texas, as well as Santa Barbara, California, and I'm talking about front underwrite protection. So basically, I'll describe the general problem, the current production technology, advanced technology, and then something about the benefits. Basically, the problem, there's like 3,000 to 5,000 fatalities a year involving the front ends of heavy trucks. What that means is the front of the truck is engaging with the rear, side, or the front of a passenger vehicle. Basically, we see that compared to the side and the rear, the front number of fatalities is dramatically higher. So a large portion of the safety benefit and consequence associated with heavy trucks is associated with the front end rather than the rear and the side. But it's a harder problem as well. This is an example of a crash that would involve the front of the heavy truck, where the heavy truck is coming along and runs into the rear of an SUV, and that SUV then rotates and slides into the rear of another semi-trailer. This is the consequence of that. Basically, in the rear impact, it ruptured the fuel tank of the SUV, and then right here you see the engagement in the rear, and then as it slid forward with the ruptured fuel tank, it slid underneath the trailer of a semi-trailer ahead of it, and this is the underride guard that fell off from that trailer, which had been improperly attached. It wasn't an original trailer underride guard. So basically, with regard to prevention and mitigation of the fatalities are associated with the front of the heavy trucks. There are basically three aspects to that. One is collision detection and automatic braking. One's improved brake systems, and one is front underride protection devices. In terms of collision detection and automatic braking, that has a long history. It started in the early 90s with radar detection and alert systems. Basically, NHTSA in the early 2000s did a study with Volvo and Virginia Tech, as I recall. WATCO announced a 2008 system. And in Europe, collision detection and avoidance technology is now required on heavy trucks, on all heavy trucks. This is an example of, in case you haven't seen this kind of thing. This is a Volvo heavy truck. And that's done automatically. And this is basically a requirement in Europe. So that's not the driver doing anything. If the driver, gets an alert, and if they did do something, then they would act in that way. Sort of addressing the front impact problem for heavy trucks is disc brakes. In the United States, most of the heavy trucks have what are called drum brakes, which have disadvantages with regard to disc brakes in terms of longevity. That is, comparison that NHTSA made with Volvo for brake systems that were drum brakes versus disc brakes after extended use found that the braking capability of the drum brakes had been significantly degraded, whereas the disc brakes hadn't. The important part about that is that most of the heavy trucks in Europe have disc brakes, and the same companies that are in Europe are also in the United States. This is just an example. NHTSA did improve the stopping distance requirement for heavy trucks from 60 miles an hour in 2011. See that? I guess you don't see the cursor there, do you? Anyway, the second white bar. And then there are systems from Demix, for example, that have dramatically better braking capability compared to even that requirement. And down here at the bottom, you see what passenger cars are doing, what they're required to do. They actually have better performance than that, but they're required. In Europe, front underride protection devices were mandated in the early 90s, and by the 2000s, it had been recognized that energy-absorbing front underride devices would be a better solution in terms of the front end of the heavy truck compared to a rigid one, but both are available. And then there are also advanced technology systems. This is an example of a system, Volvo system, with the front end of I guess we don't have a cursor, but this is the front end of the passenger vehicle running into the heavy truck. This is the engagement of the heavy truck, and that's the resulting damage on the...
Here we see another front underride protection device in a 40-mile-an-hour collision in Europe at a test track. Basically, you see an offset impact with the blue car on the right. You can see the damage, and the occupant space has been maintained, and the vehicle hasn't been overridden. Here is an example of a Volvo offset energy absorbing crash test.
In the back and the front, have to wait.
The systems we just looked at were tested at about 40-mile-an-hour closing velocities, but the advanced front underride protection is represented by systems that can provide protection in 80-mile-an-hour impact closing velocities. These systems represent the integration of collision detection, front underride prevention, and crash mitigation technologies. The advanced systems incorporate deployable energy-absorbing technology that increases the available effective crush space on the front end of the heavy truck. The increased crush space is how the system is able to handle much higher closing velocity impacts. Here we see the onset of an 80-mile-an-hour closing velocity impact in a head-on collision just prior to the deployment of an energy-absorbing heavy truck airbag. Here we can see that the inflated airbag is contacting the passenger car while providing significantly more crush space for the passenger vehicle to be decelerated over prior to getting to the heavy truck structure. Here, the heavy truck airbag is absorbing significant energy, thus enhancing crash capability at the front end of the passenger vehicle in this impact. Finally, the airbag crush space has been utilized to decelerate the passenger vehicle so that the passenger compartment accelerations and intrusions are significantly improved compared with an impact without the advanced front underride protection system. Significant opportunities for reductions in fatalities and severe injuries are available from the implementation of front underride protection systems on heavy trucks. Because of the large number of fatalities and severe injuries occurring each year from passenger vehicle crashes involving the front of heavy trucks, the implementation of effective front underride protection systems will also have high benefit-cost ratios. If you have any questions, here's my contact information. Thanks.